Hey.
Hey.
Welcome to the
here.
Food Tech Show.
Yeah, we're late. You're in some dystopian, post-apocalyptic, weird new headquarters for the Spoon, Carlos?
I'm in the new headquarters. See? The Spoon.
Yeah,
And it's
kind of
a
dark
dreary
looking.
day out.
Yeah. I think you're in Gotham.
Yeah, I think so. At the top floor.
The top floor. And I'm excited to have with us Ruth Rangan. Ruth, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, we've connected before. You used to be the head of content for Yumly, and you are just a recipe and content expert. You've worked for the Los Angeles Times and for Time Out Chicago. And I think in your bio you gave me, you said you've even been retweeted by Mindy Kaling. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know if we say re-exed now, but I wrote an article for LA Weekly about dosas, the South Indian food, and she retweeted it. And honestly, I think it was a career highlight. I mean, it was 10 years ago. I'll still never forget it.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, we love to have people come on and just give us their opinions on all the different things that we talk about. And as you know, the format for the show is just go through about 5 or so stories, and Carlos will show some photos and we can just walk through it. And the first topic we have up this week is Coca-Cola investing $1 billion+ with Microsoft to accelerate their generative AI. Food Dive had the story, and they wrote that it's a 5-year deal to use Microsoft's technology, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence services. This is actually, I think, a re-up of a deal they've done for a much lesser amount. So, Ruth, this just kind of shows that these big food and beverage companies are investing pretty heavily. And I don't even know if it's like they know what to do with it yet, or if it's just FOMO, but it just goes to show you AI is impacting every single industry vertical, and food is no exception.
Yeah, my first thought was, are they going to use this to make more Coke flavors that nobody likes? You know, they'll put AI in charge of it. But of course, that's not how this stuff works, right? I looked because it is a re-up. It's a much larger re-up of a previous deal. And I sort of looked at what they might have been doing. And weirdly, Coke seems to be an early adapter of AI. So they did a marketing campaign last Christmas, I think, for the holidays. It's UGC, and you could go in and make your own holiday card using AI. So,
all right,
using their kind of marketing assets, right? Their cute polar bear, right? Like, it's just one more way for them to own Christmas, but using AI, which is really smart. So, I mean, they're ahead. They're ahead on this. It's really cool. I was surprised.
I know that, you probably played with using AI, generative AI, to do recipes in some of the work you've done. How do you feel? I mean, it makes a lot of sense that like a company like Coke would maybe actually use it to play with new recipes for their formulas. But I don't know oftentimes how much it's like just marketing promotion, or they're actually going to use it and see it as like a competitive differentiator.
Yeah. I mean, they have more firepower, right, than I ever got to toy around with this giant deal. But I still don't think the recipe stuff is there yet. There is a lot of kind of coming up with ideas, right? Out of the box ideas is something that obviously AI can generate you 100 ideas in the time it takes you to come up with 5. But, I'm sure the first thing they're going to do is use it for stuff that's much more boring, that it's very, very good at, like logistics, right? Like shipping Coke more efficiently, saving money on trucking costs, that kind of stuff. Probably before they end up having it, turn into a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for themselves.
Yeah, I think to your point, like they mentioned using the cloud. So it's going to probably be just like hardcore logistics, right? Like here's how we can just get a lot of this stuff that's all discombobulated and put it in one place. And maybe the AI helps sort like the books, right? Like,
yeah, right.
It might just be as boring as that.
Yeah, super boring, right? But if you can save money on that, you're shipping a heavy product everywhere, right? It can make that $1 billion back for you pretty quickly, a lot faster than like coming up with one new Coke flavor that no one's gonna like anymore.
Right, that no one's gonna get. I
Yeah.
like how that whenever we think of AI, Mike and I, especially on the show, you immediately go to the weird or crazy or fun things that can happen with it, but you forget like the real basic stuff that it can just help with.
Yeah. Totally agree. Right. People are saying like, why are we having AI writing poetry and doing art for us? That's the fun stuff. We should be figured out a way to have it do our laundry, right? Or cook dinner. And I think,
or like save the earth or planet.
Yeah, that would be nice, right? And efficiency in trucking does kind of save the earth and saves you a lot of money. And that's probably where it's going to be the most helpful for them.
True.
Well, it does sound like it may be a fairly mundane use of AI around things like logistics, and logistics can be boring. But where I tell you, where it's not boring is in this next story, because it sounds almost like the steampunk type of story. I've written about these guys in the past. I don't know, Ruth, if you've ever heard of this company called Pipe Dream Labs, but they are envisioning an underground delivery network. And today they announced, or I think it was yesterday, their CEO announced that they had actually raised a $13 million funding round. I was the one that broke the story that they actually had Jeff Bezos visiting and kind of checking it out, which I thought was really interesting because Jeff Bezos, or at least Amazon, has a patent on underground delivery networks, which again just seems like kind of a crazy idea. So I thought there may be something there. But Jeff Bezos isn't the one investing. It is actually a company called Starship Ventures, which sounds like maybe more of an Elon Musk thing, even though it isn't. But what's really interesting is they're using it in two ways today. They are using it for very curbside type of applications. So imagine you're at a Wendy's drive-through and they're actually working with Wendy's. And it's like, when you're at the bank teller and you actually send the money back with your envelope and it goes above your head. This is actually kind of going underneath, and it's instead of bank money or something like that, it's actually your French fries coming to you. And they're also using it to do a citywide middle, I guess they're calling it essentially a middle mile network. And they actually had in the post a graphic of a potential middle mile network in Phoenix, which they were being very kind of, I guess, elusive. They didn't actually say what the actual city was, but I thought it was interesting that they actually had Phoenix as their example. So this actually sounds like a cool idea. I don't know how practical it is to do like a citywide middle mile network. It makes a lot of sense to maybe do with like fast food or even grocery curbside pickup, because that's really easy to do in a parking lot. But to actually do it in a citywide implementation, you have to work with all the utilities, et cetera. What do you think, Ruth? Is this something we're going to see a lot of, or this just kind of a crazy startup idea that will probably peter out?
I mean, my first thought was $13 million is not. It's not that much money. You're talking about digging a tunnel, even a little tunnel under a city. But it seems like that's the long-term goal. And then the short-term goal is this much more kind of practical thing where it's even faster than going through the drive-through, which like people like fast stuff. You control your own parking lot. I could see it, And maybe it's got legs. I love the tiny robot tunnel, it delights me, right? I don't know if they have this term, right? Hyperlogistics. I Googled it this morning, right? And so it's not, to me, it's not a defined word, right? I Googled it and they know what they think they're saying when they say hyperlogistics. And their definition, I've written it down. People in a city can receive things in under 10 minutes for less than $1.
Wow.
Right? Which is like very fast, very cheap. They do say city specifically, right? They're not talking about like a coast to coast, you get a toothbrush situation. But again, $13 million isn't going to cut it, but they're spending that money on something that's sort of, you can picture them actually doing. So, I'm sort of like, go tunnel robot, but.
Yeah. And also that's a very specific explanation to their definition. I mean, they're putting numbers on that. That seems crazy.
Yeah. I mean.
Yeah. And I don't know if you have a picture of it again, Carlos. We don't, I think, have the video, but it essentially is like a little underground railroad track. It's not like, the, what are those tubes that you shoot through underground? I think Elon was building one of. Yeah. It's not a hydraulic tube. It is basically an underground little railroad network. And to me, I start to think about, okay, if you're going like a middle mile, 5 miles to the next stop, what happens if one of these breaks down? It just seems like this could be potentially ridden with potential problems. I hope it works. My feeling is the underground drive-through implementation, or like having your groceries come to you probably makes more realistic sense for this thing to work.
Yeah, fast food and fries, like they're gonna go cold. I'm sorry that those fries are getting cold underground, even if it's heated. So I don't know. And for all, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like you've seen, like the Taco Bell is actually doing overhead multi-lane delivery now. So it's not just because delivery or drive-throughs, usually the choke point is it all goes down to one window, but all of these guys are trying to figure out how to get multiple cars through at once. And I think this is kind of one of those ways you could do that, because in rush hour, you want to get as many cars through as possible. You don't want cars lining up. Otherwise, it's going to go down the street, go to another McDonald's. But if you can get a bunch of them going through at once, I feel like this is like one way they can do that. So it makes a lot of sense for these guys.
It's just tricky, those logistics, loading in and out of that tunnel. I mean, yeah, it just seems like a logistics nightmare. I did, however, like I want to do, gave this story to AI and told it to draw some artwork of a tunnel that would deliver food underground. And so this is the first one it gave me.
That's pretty good.
It's awesome.
Not bad, right? Like you can see, I guess that's food in there in the
giant. So it's a giant conveyor belt network.
Yeah, conveyor belt network, and those are like serving dishes, like massive serving dishes.
Yeah.
This one's more realistic. Check this out.
Yeah, I can see that. That looks like something out of like Toy Story or something.
Yeah, there's like drones flying underground too, but like that takes a lot of money, more than $13 million.
Yeah.
That we just talked about. But that is the type of thing that could deliver a bunch of stuff underground. But yeah.
I like it. All right. Well, that is, we'll see what happens. I don't have tons of high hope. I think it's a cool idea. I think, like I said, it probably worked better in drive-thrus. I want to move on to this next story. And I have to ask if either of you been to Foxtrot. Have you been there?
I've been to a Dom's marketplace.
Okay.
Back when I lived in Chicago. So, which I didn't even realize until I looked at the story and I recognized the inside of the store and did like a little Google map. I was like, oh yeah, I've been to one of those. Like gorgeous, charming, airy, lots of wine, lots of fancy snacks. So
yeah, and Foxtrot merged with Dom's, I think, last year. Well,
yeah, I was seeing that there's like a lot of sorrow on the internet about this. I was like, what is this? I haven't heard of this. I had to Google it to remind myself I'd been to one. And people seem so bummed out. But then I looked at it and, did a little research. And now I'm bummed out too, because they're such cool stores, right? They had like 40% of their inventory was small local brands, right? And just such a good idea, so appealing, like Whole Foods, back when Whole Foods was cool and new. So now I'm bummed out too that they closed.
Yeah. So the story is, and it was actually broken by Snackshot and picked up by a lot of different outlets, is that Foxtrot, which is part of a company called Outfox Hospitality Group, which is the merged Foxtrot and Dom's Kitchen, essentially closed with no forewarning. It was kind of crazy. You don't often see a company just like employees show up one day and the doors are shut. Yeah. And I think they had like 33 or so locations across Chicago, DC, and a few other East Coast locations. But and there was a message that was put out, I think, on social and on their website that said, hey, we tried hard. We tried to raise money. But there is a follow-up article in Forbes that showed how this sudden shutting down of Foxtrot market really kind of freaked out a lot of suppliers, because as you pointed out, Ruth, they show up, they have a lot of cool brands, like a lot of small brands. So a lot of companies actually got their start there. Omsom is like a company that we've written about at The Spoon, do these really cool Asian sauces. A couple of sisters out of New York City. They are shown there. There's a couple others that are there as well. And Forbes had an article interviewing a lot of these folks that are like, where maybe 50% of their business is at Foxtrot. So it's kind of crazy how disruptive this is.
Yeah, it sounds like it was really sudden, right? They told everyone the store is shutting down at noon today forever. Don't tell the customers. So yeah, and if you have a lot of like outstanding invoices with them as a provider, that's tough, right? These small businesses, that's gotta be hard.
Carlos, you have not been to Foxtrot, but I know that you have a particular I don't think Trader Joe's is exactly like it, but I do think you have a preference for some of these cool, smaller CPG brands. So I would imagine if you're like an entrepreneur in this space, it'd be pretty upsetting if
Yeah,
like
if I
you're
was a
getting your start
brand,
there.
yeah, if I was a brand that was my place for discoverability, it's a huge letdown. Um, but like for me personally, like I go to places like Metropolitan Market here in the Northwest, and they have, quite a good backing financially, so they're not going anywhere. I think that's another part of it. But yeah, this just sucks. And it's also par for the course with just companies just closing. I am been a part of that myself.
Well, hopefully you get a little more forewarning when your company closes. So yeah, I think that was the kind of the big story. And there's been a lot of cool, I think, people trying to reinvent and rethink the grocery store. This is one of the cool ones. So it's kind of unfortunate that Foxtrot is no more, because it was one of those concepts that people were talking about, really focusing in on those kind of cool new millennial focused type of CPG brands. And so bummer for a lot of these companies. So let's move on to the next story. We've seen a lot of ghost kitchen stories over the past couple of years, bemoaning the issues and the struggles that the companies are having. It looks like New York Times finally got around to writing their "Ghost Kitchens Are Struggling" article, and so this was a pretty well researched article, and they went through all the different companies that are basically who had big bets like Wendy's and Kroger. They talked about some of the virtual brands like that are backing Beast Burger, for example, and just talked about how a lot of these companies are pulling back. And one of the interesting, I think, points that I hadn't really thought a lot about is there's a quote by Kenneth Hochman with Brinkers. And he pointed out how a lot of these restaurants like Brinkers, they have a lot of different restaurants, jumped into the ghost kitchen space, and they thought it'd be a lot easier. But what they realize is the fast times and the busy times for virtual restaurants are the same times for the existing restaurants. So the kitchens were getting overwhelmed at a lot of the restaurants. And that was actually an interesting point that I think I hadn't really heard that much before. So I don't know. Ruth, have you done much with regards to ghost kitchens? Do you use virtual restaurant brands through like some of the Grubhubs or the Uber Eats?
Yeah. So this is a great chance for me to shout out my husband's favorite ghost kitchen. It is called Calzone Life. And I mean, I think you can get a soda too, but like it is just calzones. And I feel like right? I feel like places like this that specialize in one thing, if they've got their kitchen set up very efficiently and just you order a calzone, they put it on your doorstep, I think they might survive this, right? But I can understand why if a commercial restaurant has just been trying to kind of do them both in their kitchen, and then the kitchen is busy again because people are in place again in the restaurant, they just can't handle it. But my hope is that the calzone lives of the world are going to survive this correction. And I wonder if some of this is being affected by the sort of return to office, because I think if you're in the office, you have a lunch break, maybe you're going to go out to a restaurant with your coworkers. But whereas if you're working from home, maybe you just get a calzone left on the steps, and that's perfect, right? So I wonder if that change is also affecting these ghost kitchens.
I think it's a lot of things, and realistically, the ghost kitchen market dynamics are less of a technology vertical industry dynamic, is closer to that of real estate, and so a lot of these are big real estate plays. Travis Kalanick, formerly founder of Uber, he just acquired a bunch of like abandoned warehouses and put kitchens in them. And I think that it's not like building a software as a service product or, building like an artificial intelligence product. You're basically buying and doing a lot of remodeling of these giant expensive real estate projects. So I think there's a lot of different reasons for it. I think this was a decent article going through a lot of the issues. And so, Carlos, I don't know, what's your favorite virtual restaurant product you order? You have like your chickens?
Yeah, I don't even use them ever. But I mean, now I have to check out Calzone Life because
oh my gosh,
just Googled it and I was like, that looks amazing.
They're huge and they're delicious.
And I decided because of that, I'm just going to make it our background because
amazing.
That's like the biggest calzone. Do you guys split one of those, or like does your husband down one by himself?
I take a third. I take the third off the end. So
okay. All right.
No,
Very
I don't even
impressive.
use them. But I mean, I think you're right, Ruth, with the idea of like this format is interesting for a single product. If you have a single product, especially like desserts, I would think too, something that you can just like, it's easy form factor and you can bring it in somewhere. And, you know, again, it's discoverability. So it's a new place for people to find it and get it. And it's also helping deliver the actual item because maybe you can't obviously manufacture it everywhere. So I think it can work on smaller items. I don't really use them much, but I would.
All right. All right. Well, that's an industry that, like a lot of others in the broader food tech space, has seen a lot less investment. And another one, moving to our final story, that has seen a lot less investment is cultivated meat and just the broader alternative protein space. If you guys don't know this already, you should know that the Good Food Institute puts out, like, really, I think, some of the most authoritative reports on the space. And they put out their state of the cultivated meat report, I think, this past week. And it was a pretty eye-popping drop. The cultivated meat and seafood company Space, the startups, raised $225 million in 2023, which was just a fraction of what it raised in 2022, which is $922 million. And I think 2022 is down from the previous year. So you definitely saw a significant drop. And I think the biggest total round last year was a $30 million or so round in a company called Meatable. What we didn't see, and I think the reason for these giant drops, is we just saw a lot of the late round investments going into companies like Upside and also Eat Just. Those investments were there, and those late round investments oftentimes have been very big, and those oftentimes, you know, the hundreds of millions of dollars. So those oftentimes will almost artificially inflate the numbers. But just generally, I think, and I don't know how much you follow the space, Ruth, I think the confidence in kind of the speculative nature of an industry that really is going to be like probably another decade from really producing significant revenues for a lot of these investors, in a space where we've seen, just in a time when we've seen a lot of venture capital just kind of pull back. This is just too big a gamble for a lot of people. So I think we just saw a lot of the total number of investments and the total revenue go down quite a bit.
Yeah, it seems like it'll be a while before, you know, they refer to kind of price parity with like traditional meat, I'll call it. It seems like they're pretty far ways off from that, and that probably a lot of the kind of space they want to be taking up is being eclipsed by the simulacrum, right? Plant-based, your kind of impossible meats, right? Yeah, it seems like it's chugging along, but it is kind of losing a little bit of its inertia. But, you know, it did say the report, which, you know, the Good Food Institute, right, is a think tank that's like pro alternative proteins, right?
Yeah.
But it did point out there are lots of new businesses opening to do this. So it's progressing forward. It is just like, it's not going as quickly, you know, and I think you're right, Mike, that the horizon for when this could be like a main marketplace product is pretty far off still.
Yeah, and the report's pretty well researched, and it had a lot of other things besides the total investment, like the number of. It goes into detail of all the different companies. It goes into the detail about the new, I guess, countries that have greenlighted it. Israel, I think, last year greenlighted the tasting of it after the U.S. opened up last year as well, following Singapore and a few other. Or I think Singapore was the first one. So I think we're at a total of 3 or 4 total countries now. I think Australia just greenlighted, so we're at 4 now. But I don't know, kind of stepping back from cultivated and just looking at plant-based, when you were at Yumly, were you guys doing a lot of work with the alternative proteins, like the plant-based meats and stuff, in terms of building recipes for folks?
So we did some. I think we were still seeing demand as far as like what people were clicking on for traditional meats, right? People are looking for chicken, they're looking for ground beef. So we didn't do a lot of stuff with alternative meats, in part because I do think you need to build the recipe around the very specific brand name because they behave differently, right? But you could always do a swap 1-for-1, right, with the Impossible ground burger for ground meat. So that was something we were looking at because it's a way to expand the number of recipes that you own as a content producer, right? But we just weren't seeing a lot of demand. People aren't cooking dinner with those meats regularly. Now I use some Impossible foods. I'm married to a vegetarian, so I definitely do it just as a swap in an existing recipe myself.
I think that's where it'd be interesting to see if generative AI gets smart enough to understand the different characteristics of the alt proteins. And say you swap out for like a plant-based meat, and it maybe behaves differently, but you could put a question to your GPT, maybe it's recipe GPT, whatever you're talking to, and say, hey, I'm using Impossible, or I'm using Beyond, how long I should cook it, what it's going to do for the flavor.
Oh, they could do that now.
Okay.
Yeah, I could do that now.
I think it's pretty close to
so I don't know. OpenAI doesn't understand the difference between Beyond and Impossible. Come on, it's like,
well, I mean, maybe not the difference between the brands, but like you could say, like I have veggie meat, or I think you can even say you can call it brands. I don't know about Beyond versus Impossible. Okay, yes, I'll give you that. But if you go like I have Impossible hamburger, and I want to do a recipe, it'll give you plenty of recipes. So that part works.
Cool. I mean, those are the biggest ones, and that was kind of simplistic. But then you start to get into alternative, like other types of, fungi-based meat or whatever. I just saying kind of more broadly, kind of a large language model start to handle all these differences. That'd be kind of cool in the future.
Yeah, it's doing lots of stuff that, again, a lot of people don't think of AI as doing, and it can do that kind of stuff, which again is like working alongside us. I've definitely been a proponent for it, and I know it's evils, but I think there's just so many other use cases we don't know about. And
so
of course,
before are you going to show a picture? I know you're going to show a picture.
Yeah, I'm going to show pictures of what?
Ruth, have you been using OpenAI, ChatGPT, or others to create recipes? And then have you tested them actually in the kitchen?
Yeah, I definitely, that was one of the things we were doing at Yumly right before I left, where I asked it, and this was pretty simplistic of me, make me an apple pancake recipe. And then I cooked it exactly as I was told to. And they were a little gross,
Yeah.
But the thing, you're saying, Carlos, about working alongside the AI is I looked at that recipe and I thought that is a lot of baking soda, my robot friend. But I put the amount in I was told to put in, and I knew better. So I think there is a way to make efficiencies and to come up with new ideas, but you can't just release your common sense and be like, robots take the wheel, right? So I've definitely tested it. I haven't found a formula that I'm like, now it makes all the best recipes. This is, it's like Ina Garten bot. But it's getting there. And I think if you run it through a human who knows what they're talking about, you can make that human faster, better, more efficient too.
Yeah. Yeah. To that point, I recently found this kind of regimen for supplements and diet. Mike, I was telling you about this. It's called the Blueprint, and it's pretty involved, and it's kind of expensive and a lot of supplements. So I just asked ChatGPT and Copilot and any other one I had around, which is so many you can ask now. I was like, hey, so look at this. And by the way, it's on the internet, right? It's called the Blueprint. Build me a recipe like this and supplements like it, but not it. And it did, right? So it wasn't great, but it gave me new options, right? It gave me new things that I could try. Instead of omega-3 oil, try this thing or whatever. So that's it. It's just working with it and seeing what it gives you. Speaking of AI, wow, I got
all right.
loud.
Here we go.
So I asked AI for 2 images, and they're just for cultivated meat. So this is what it gave us: cultivated meat. I don't know. I'm a little scared. All those needles.
Yeah, I mean,
tasty? No.
Looks scary? Like just regular meat. I can't really tell the difference. I mean, all the like Mid-Journey based cultivated meat I've done is like an actual bioreactor, so they look a lot creepier because it's sitting in these big glass.
Oh, so this is more normal then. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks more normal. It looks like it's sitting in the doctor's like operating table or something.
Right.
It looks like it looks like an organ or something essentially.
I know, which to me I guess makes it look gross. But this one maybe is more along the lines of what you're used to then.
Yeah, it's like growing in some futuristic.
Also not delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. As it sizzles there and waits. Before we go, I do have 2 more images I wanted to show, or just one image of 2 images, which is I asked it for the spoon recently. I said the spoon and robots. And so it gave us a pizza robot, and we're reporting on it with our phone. And then I guess we're at the spoon exhibit in a futuristic world where the robots are cooking for us.
That's a spoon like a cooking studio, apparently, where we have a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
We're opening that soon. So, anyways, there's my AI.
Ruth, this has been a lot of fun. Tell people about, a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do, and then maybe where they can find out more information about you.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a head of content. I am looking for a job right now. My specialty is food content and stuff that will bring people to a website or an app, and then kind of the sticky content inside it. So you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. But I do also have a website, ruthrangan.com. So check me out.
That's RANGAN for those.
Yeah, RANGAN. That's right.
Very cool. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Ruth, and I always appreciate your opinions. And thanks for putting up with us and our AI art.
Putting up with us.
Thanks for having me. This was super
I think that was
fun.
directed at me.
No, of course
comment.
not.
No, Ruth, thanks so much for being here. I always love talking about AI, getting fresh perspectives of just food in general and the tech space. Awesome to have you here.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Until next week, guys. Bye.
Until next week. Bye.
That was a very like what's the one with Jason Bateman and Smartless? The goodbye.
Oh yeah, bye. Do they just say bye?
Bye.
Oh, by the way, follow us on social, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. It's The Spoon or The Spoon.tech or The Spoon Tech.
Right.
You'll figure it out.
All right.